In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Brian Fry, Chad Robinson, Dustin Melbardis, Lizzie Haynes, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome all you lords, ladies, and knights to the Retro Movie Roundtable. Welcome to the show where we watch movies and then talk about them. I'm your host, Russell Guest, and joining me today from deep in the heart of Texas, my good friend, Mr. Dustin Melbardis. How you doing, sir?
Good evening, Russell. How are you?
I am great. It's my Thanksgiving day. It's the weekend before Thanksgiving when we're recording this. So if I sound tired, I'm got the tryptophan like pumping through my veins. I had my turkey and my stuffing today, so I'm very full, and it's good that I'm up late, just letting all that settle in on me. So
yeah,
I'm fat and happy.
Head.
You know, I'm pumped though. Do you know why?
Because of all the gravy?
Nothing food related. It has to do with the special guests that we brought on today. One of the best. We called in the heavy hitters here. We got Mr. DJ Bryant. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. How about you gentlemen tonight?
I'm doing great. This is a very exciting one for me to cover, and I'm glad you're here. Let's kick it off. Today's movie, Some Like It Hot. What is a hot movie that you like? Steamy, alluring, sexy.
I'm going to go with Cruel Intentions, 1999. Ryan Felipe? Yes, please. Yes, God.
Yes. Okay.
Now I have to pick a second one because that was my pick too. Cruel Intentions. It was the perfect timing for me as a young man.
That is amazing.
And I do want to say, Dustin thinks manipulation is hot in movies.
Okay.
Not in real life.
Okay.
Not in real life. Not in real life. Okay. I went another direction. I went with the Thomas Crown Affair. I don't know if you've ever seen this one or not.
Pierce Brosnan,
Rene Russo.
Lovely.
Yeah. Now, what is the last movie you watched, DJ?
Last movie I watched was the Hellraiser trilogy, beginning in 1987, obviously culminating in a different year, and that was for Halloween.
Awesome. We just did that on our show. What did you think of those? Those three. I mean, obviously the third one, I think things go off the rails, but did you have fun with that?
I mean, I love those. I think they're really wonderful in terms of just the horror and the decadence of it all. Like, it is a very wonderful trilogy and series, and it's spooky, and I love all of that stuff.
As I said on the episode, it is actually quite underrated, I think.
It is. It totally is, yes.
Dustin, how about you? What's the last movie you watched?
Looper from 2012. My friend Tucker had it on, and it was at the scene where old man meets young man, I guess we'll say. I'm not going to spoil anything, but old man meets young man. I thought to myself, I can sit down and watch another hour 15 of this. It's just fun.
Not to keep plugging ourselves, but if you want to check out and hear a little more about Looper, I won't say where and when and how, but check out our top 10 of 2012. Could be on there. All right. So today, DJ, what movie are we going to cover today?
We're going to talk about Some Like It Hot, circa 1959.
All right. This stars Marilyn Monroe, the icon herself, Tony Curtis, that's Jamie Lee Curtis's dad, Jack Lemmon, who, that's just Jack Lemmon no matter what generation you're from, George Raft, Joe E. Brown, and Pat O'Brien. It grosses $2.9 million. It cost, the budget was $2.9 million. It grosses $25 million domestically, huge returns, number 3 on the year, massive success. It comes in behind The Shaggy Dog and ahead of Operation Petticoat. And the number 1 movie in 1959, we covered it as well. I'm just plugging ourselves left and right. Ben-Hur, check out that from our 40th episode. So IMDb gives Some Like It Hot a nice 8.2, and the critics, Rotten Tomatoes, 94%, and the audience score right there with it, 94%. Rotten Tomatoes really loves this. It is an Academy Award winner for Best Costume Design, black and white. They separated things at the time, black and white versus color. Academy Award nominee 5 times for a comedy. Really impressive. Best Director, Best Actor, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Cinematography for a comedy. It's astounding. So, Best Art Direction as well. Golden Globes winner, 3 of them, for Best Actor in a Motion Picture, Best Actress in a Motion Picture, Jack Lemmon and Marilyn Monroe. Best Motion Picture, Musical or Comedy. It gets a BAFTA win for Jack Lemmon, Best New Foreign Actor. Gets another BAFTA nominee. 3-time Laurel Award winner. And here's some big ones here. The AFI distinctions. AFI on the top 100 movie quotes has this at number 48 for Nobody's Perfect. And it is also on the top 100 movies at number 22. And it was updated from where it was number 14 before. So in 1998, it was number 14 on top movies of all time. And in 2000, they named it the number 1 best comedy of all time for the 100 Years of Laughs. So we could potentially be dealing with the greatest comedy of all time. So no pressure. DJ, had you seen it? What was it like coming back to it today?
Well, yes, I had seen it. I don't remember when I saw this. I do remember this was in a very intense kind of Marilyn Monroe obsession and kind of looking at all of her kind of, I would say, essential cinema. So obviously that's going to involve All About Eve, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, How to Marry a Millionaire, and The 7-Year Itch. And this one kind of struck right into that. And it was great seeing it again. Like, it was honestly great seeing it again. I love this film. It's so good. It's so funny.
Now, do you feel like, as you've been watching it, it has aged well? And then has it aged well? Again, 59 is a long time ago. Many things have changed. Perceptions have changed about the subject matter. Does this hold up here in the 2020s?
If we look at it for what it was in its time, I think it holds up very well. Essentially, getting into the logistics of this, you have 2 men in drag pretending to be women and living up this kind of like double life. And I think for that time, that is very interesting and that is very poignant to be showcasing in cinema, especially mainstream popular culture cinema. If we were to dive into it through a lens of today, there are some cringy moments, but I think it, for what it is, when it was, how it happened, it's perfect.
Yeah, it's almost better that it is anchored to when it was.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, very good. Dustin, how about you? Have you seen this one before?
No, I've never seen this movie before. As our listeners know, I wait for you to tell me a movie and then I watch it. And I was pleasantly surprised when I look at the movies before 1970. Sometimes I give myself a little shrug and say, okay, I guess, yeah, let's see. I know you like the old movies. For me, I have to put myself in the right mindset. Now, I love doing that. Sitting down and saying, okay, this is going to be a big culture difference. We're looking at 60 years. Let's dig in. And I was rolling on the floor. I'm not surprised that our AFI list gave this as high of a ranking as it did. I do agree with what DJ said about let's look at what this idea was for the time. And I think like some of the things would clearly not even be seen as like even taking a risk today. But it was a huge risk 60 years ago. That being said, the jokes were a mile a minute. Not all of them are knockout punches. Some of them are just very clever lines. I wasn't expecting the writing and the dialogue to be as witty as it was. Some of it isn't even really, I don't think, meant to make you laugh. It's meant to just get you in the experience or the mindset of just how people with this attitude talked to one another, and I love it. I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah, it's holding up to the clout that it has. Is what I'm.
That's it. That I think I know exactly what you're asking. Yes, it does, and some don't. I don't have to try that hard to understand what they were going for. And if you are watching this movie, you can introduce something that's 30 years old to a teenager nowadays, and they'll look at it as if they don't understand what's going on. I don't think your mind has to work that hard to sort of get in the feel for what it would have been like to sit in the audience and watch this. It was a thrill. And I would say this is something that, like I mentioned with Looper, if I saw that this was like on, I would sit down and continue watching it.
It is fun. I remember the first time that I saw this when I think I was in college when I got to it finally. And I was seeking out all the AFI greatest thrills, comedies, action movies, all that stuff, horror movies. And obviously this being at the top of the comedies list, you know, I kind of came into it being a big fan of comedies. Comedy's my favorite thing. So I was kind of coming a little bit skeptical of like, I like a lot of certain comedies that didn't even make this countdown or are much lower. What is this movie doing in this position? What is this 1959 thing that they,
right.
You know,
you're skeptical of it, right?
Yeah. How funny are you? And I got to say, I left very pleased. I liked it a lot. And I have returned to it once more since then, but there's long gaps in between it. And every time I come back to it, I'm sitting there going like, why have I not watched this more recently? This is great. So,
well, I want to bring this up real quick, Russell and DJ. Sometimes, like just 2 weeks ago or something, we did the movie Dracula. And what's the movie Dracula about? Dracula. Well, with this movie, Some Like It Hot, we do get it mentioned in the movie like an hour and 10 minutes in, but I suppose it does have a close, like it's adjacent to what the movie is about, really. But you look at the title of the movie and maybe you don't know what it's about at all. I certainly didn't. So when I have the chance to get introduced to something like this, and then you get blown away, I was so glad I didn't know that it had that high accolade of being ranked number one of the best comedies in the century. I'm glad I didn't know, because coming into it the way that I did, just like, wow, what a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, and actually I'm curious to know as we get on the other side of the break how the movie experienced as you're kicking into it if you don't know what you're getting in for, because it starts off like a mob movie. So
yes, it does.
Yeah. But anyway, we'll get into this as we get past the spoiler wall here. So there will be spoilers that lie ahead. Do not spoil this one. If you have not seen Some Like It Hot, you owe it to yourself to see this one as any film fan, which is the kind of people who come to listen to us. So definitely check this one out. We will be back after this.
Welcome to the All 80s Movies Podcast.
I'm Bill.
And I'm Jason. And this is the podcast where we talk about the blockbusters, the flops, and everything in between from one of the freshest decades for movies, the 1980s. So whether you're a brain, a jock, a valley girl, or a Jedi, we've got some 80s classics for you.
Do these movies stand the test of time? Are we discovering something new? Is there an 80s movie we're finally watching for the first time?
Join us each week as we dive into the cinematic nostalgia that inspired and influenced a generation. From the hits to the cult classics, we'll discuss our earliest memories, favorite scenes, fun facts, and our not-so-favorite movie moments, too.
It's the All 80s Movies Podcast, now available on all major streaming platforms. Please subscribe and happy listening.
We're back, and there will be spoilers that lie ahead. Now, Dustin, for those who haven't seen Some Like It Hot since 1959, do you want to refresh people's memories?
It's Chicago in the late 1920s, and Prohibition is full on. Joe and Jerry are two musicians doing their best to pay the bills, working in Spats Columbo's speakeasy underneath Mozzarella's funeral parlor. The police show up to bust the operation, and the two street-smart fellas beat feet out of there. After looking for more temporary music gigs, they learn of a wonderful opportunity for a sax player and a string bass player, no less, but it's playing for an all-female outfit, Sweet Sue and her Society Syncopators. On their way to another gig, they witness yet another gang-related incident, this one resulting in at least 5 men getting rubbed out and barely escape with their lives. Their best bet to escape the mafia? Disguise themselves as Josephine and Daphne and hop a train with the women's band down to sunny Florida. Gender-bending hijinks ensue as they struggle to maintain their false identities, especially when they are surrounded by all these rather talented dames, including the sultry Sugar Cane, what is she, a Bond girl? Who just so happens to have a bad habit of getting mixed up with the wrong kind of men, saxophonists. Now that they're in Florida, They should be safe from the eyes of the mob, allowing us to focus on Joe's second identity theft, this time as the heir to Shell Oil in an attempt to trick Sugar into falling in love with him. We could also focus on Daphne's new love interest, Osgood Fielding III, another millionaire, which seems like it's really got legs, except for just the absolute brutal coincidence that Spatz and his gangsters happen to be in town for the Friends of the Italian Opera Conference, presided over by the infamous Little Bonaparte. Now our boys, or should I say gals, have to get to safety again, with a daring chase scene through ballroom halls, underneath mobsters' feet, and avoiding deadly birthday cake to the docks on the beach, where Osgood, Daphne, Joe, and Sugar escape to relative safety.
Well done, well done. And there is a lot that happens there. As I mentioned, this movie starts off like a mob movie. It's like a 1940s mob movie, although it's not in the 40s. We're set in the 20s. We'll come back to that in a minute here. But this movie spends a lot of time before it ever gets going laying the groundwork. You mentioned, DJ, that this long movie, I mean, they're not yucking it up right away. And that's an interesting move here that Billy Wilder makes.
100% totally. And can we just say that this is like the story of my life, honestly?
Well, you need to hear more about this then.
Yeah. But like for the first 3 minutes, there is no dialogue. You just witness this gangster scene and you come into this as if you had not seen this before, you had no idea what you're getting into. What am I watching right now? This is not a comedy. This is very intense. And it's the breaks that they put into this and the comedy and it makes it fabulous, honestly.
You're right, as in you don't know exactly what's going on yet. And there's focus on... There's an automatic escalation if the cops are already firing. You've got holes in these caskets. I think it's at this point you see a little bit of liquid going out, so it does make sense. Okay, these are false caskets transporting booze, perhaps. There's a cool moment in the we'll say the getaway car where the ceiling fabric of the vehicle is unpeeled or unsnapped and they pull weapons out from under there. They're like, wow, we are in a heist movie. What did I sit down for? And then that's all just table dressing.
It is. And it's amazing that I think there's something powerful in that, though. That pivot, I think there's something of you expect something to happen and then something else very different happens. I'm going to use an architectural term of compress and release. Frank Lloyd Wright would take you in a small space and he really would pinch the ceiling down uncomfortably close, turn you 90 degrees. You do not see what you're walking into, and then he would release you. And then that's actually the main event of why you're there, but there was no indication of what was coming because you had actually set the table for the opposite of that, and that makes the comedy more rewarding that you saw it out of this very serious situation. So that's a powerful thing that you do as a filmmaker, to use people's emotions to invest. Like you said, I'm in a mob movie. I'm genuinely excited. There's a sense of urgency and there's a sense of character that's being built before they ever start to play with what the framework is. So I don't know if that's a fair point, DJ, or if that's me overpraising it.
No, that is 100% spot on. I agree with everything you just said. I don't know what to add to it, in fact, because it is so unexpected. And we'll talk about this more, but even in the ending scene, it is anticlimax upon anticlimax upon anticlimax. Right? And it keeps pulling you deeper into this whole dialogue. And you're like, why am I watching this for 2 hours? But it's funny and it's good and you love it. That's why.
There are some times when guests say that something is good and what they're trying to do is justify why it's a favorite movie. But DJ is right. This is good. I don't like long movies. One of my biggest things. If it's over 2 hours, then that means you're having to drag me to watch this. But I think what's really important about setting this mafia situation in Chicago up is, and tell me what you think about this, we have to have a good reason for why Joe and Jerry would go to the lengths of dressing up like women. It can't be for a lark.
That's a good point.
right? It can't just be for fun. Now, we could see that if it were today, but the extreme swing of the pendulum is at what point would you consider going in drag, dressing up, and infiltrating the train to get down to Florida and part of this all-women's band? Oh, we witnessed a murder, and we got to get out of here. So I feel like they almost had to go to that extreme in order for some people not to just blow their top. Maybe I'm over-exaggerating here, but I think it makes sense.
I agree with you here, Dustin, because I think you were right. Like, it is that you have to create the reason behind doing this, because this is so transgressional for the time period. And what we were seeing, why would two men cross-dress as women and live this double life and do this? And this was the only socially acceptable means at the time for why this would happen. Mind you, there are other means and other reasons why you would do this as a man. You like it, you're a drag queen, whatever. But this was what pop culture needed to hear. And this is what made them feel safe and comfortable.
Yes and no. When they actually screened this, DJ, I'll go right to it. Like, this did terribly. They had people upset. They walked out of the theaters. They said, this is trash. My children can't see this. And, I mean, like you said, all the things that 1950s, norms could bring, and they changed very, very little. And we'll talk about what they changed later, but then they re-aired different theater in Brentwood, younger audience, and then they loved it and changed very little. 30 seconds, just very small adjustment. And that it's not really in the adjustment. I think it has to do with who's watching it, but obviously people flocked to the theaters and they got over it. It's interesting, to your point, how quickly comfortable people, even in this time, this dodgy time, became connected to these characters and just said, this is fun. It's actually against the odds that this was so successful, really, I think.
The movie also puts you in positions that are, by necessity, uncomfortable. There's an amount of cringing, perhaps. Maybe it's just like the fear of getting caught. I found myself almost on the edge of my seat, or just like, oh no, they're so close to getting caught. And I'm more nervous for this in a social situation for 1959 than I am seeing a movie about, like, warfare or espionage or assassination. Like, the social risk of this was enough to be like, oh, what's gonna happen if they do, when they do? And that's another reason that it's so surprising that the movie's 2 hours long, because you would expect the jig would be up eventually, but really we make it the whole way, don't we?
Pretty much, right up to the and at least for Oswald.
It's a self-reveal from Joe, is it? I don't remember exactly, but it's very late. Josephine. But it's a self-reveal, and then of course we get
no. It was Daphne. That was
that's the end.
That's the end. Yeah, Daphne's the end. Josephine is first. That's we understand Josephine's true character. But Dustin, I think I'm gonna pick up on something you're laying down, because I think in my mind as well, this reads like almost like first date, like with a new person, like. You want to put on the best person you are. You want to be like this like superstar of an individual and not show all the baggage that you come with, Yeah. And at some point that has to be revealed, because if it's true love, if there's something truthful there, you have to reveal the true core of your persona. And that's the kind of dramatic drive here, is that like, okay, Joe/Josephine is very into sugar. Mm. And Sugar is also into not Josephine, what she thinks is Josephine. And there's like territory there. That's like the territory you have to navigate as a new lover with someone's like, okay, this is what you know of me, and here's what you're going to realize of me. Are you okay with that?
Sugar believes she's confiding in Josephine, when in reality what she's doing is revealing the baggage to Joe. It's strange to say that, like, we don't really get how much screen time do we have of Sugar and Joe together? 10 seconds?
Not a lot.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get like a period of the movie where it's like, well, surprise, and the wig comes up. This is actually who I was. Instead, we get another hour of him playing this shell-oiled executive. When they get down to Florida, what's the first thing they want to do? We want to go swimming. And then Daphne, I gotta say, Jack Lemmon, choice to choose, like, well, I'm a Daphne now, is so fun. That's one of the first things I just laughed out loud at. But just like the flippant attitude towards it, yeah, we can do all this fun stuff, when it's just every choice is the potential for getting caught. And let's not forget, because this is something I'm quite critical of, shouldn't they be home safe once they're out of the state in 1959? Shouldn't you think that the whole mob driving them out of Chicago, like, ooh, we wipe our brow, we made it, we're safe. We don't have to keep up the ruse now anymore. I suppose there's, at this point, we're still dealing with a lot of dishonesty. Now they're looking to make riches. How do we steal and how do we pose as millionaires? None of it is really like, I'm really got a heart of gold, knight in shining armor. It's almost all deception in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing that keeps them in it is because of their interest in the women who they're around. Now, they are musicians, and they're not faking what they do. They can actually play. So I actually would contest and say faking a millionaire is harder because, they are still musicians. They are not changing their socioeconomic status. They're having to walk in women's shoes, and they have all the typical funny things of like, hey, that's hard dealing with that as a woman. That's always funny. I mean, if you look at number 2 on the AFI list, it's hard to it's hard to walk around in women's high heels, if you will, as a man, because you're used to going through your life into a certain degree of privilege in a certain way with that. And so when you have the carpet pulled out, number 2 movie I was getting at is Tootsie. That's another cross-dressing movie turned on its head. So clearly the AFI finds this dynamic to be very funny. And it is. Yeah. Both of them are very funny. But to fake a millionaire is something you've never even, you have so little in common with that, so to some degree. And you're walking in and saying like, I'm going to take you to this other part of my yacht. And it's like, a nice thing about this yacht is it has nice closets, so visibly not in his element. But this also makes Marilyn Monroe's dumb blonde kind of sweetheart personality all the more endearing. And she makes it work because she is so gullible, but also such a sweetheart. You love her for just being such a good-natured person.
Well, I do kind of want to bring up the dumb blonde thing. Is she the worst investigator or like the lowest perception that we could have had? Like, it's such a gift that it's almost like too easy to pull the wool over her eyes.
Can we just put on a public service announcement at this point and just issue the proclamation that every man at some point in their lives should put on stilettos and ideally fishnets and tramps around just a little bit just to see how it's like?
Oh, I'm down. I'm totally down.
That's the challenge has been laid down. Is this a holdover of what is called the screwball comedy? Now, the screwball comedy really starts to come into play in the 30s and runs into the 40s. This is way later than typically we'd call a screwball comedy. But a screwball comedy is where a male character has their masculinity challenged, often in like a funny battle of like the sexes, or like it drops in a woman who's really strong usually and turns things on its head, and comedy can come from that. It's kind of a dead genre or subgenre, if you will. But this movie, while not necessarily driven by, a woman taking control of a relationship as much as the screwball, it does often have people playing roles of who they are not, like Bringing Up Baby or like All About Eve, where you have this very strong female figure that then, in terms, maybe takes away the masculinity or emasculates kind of the male character. But in this case, it's not a character doing that. It's the men are being placed into women's shoes, and therefore their masculinity is being forced to be reevaluated. I would contend and say that this is out of the era of screwball comedies, but you could call this a pseudo screwball comedy because of that.
I don't think this is fun or enjoyable to watch because of someone losing something. I think it's fun or enjoyable to watch because of Jerry and Joe gaining something, which is perspective and experience. We get some sweet moments of that throughout the movie. And I think we could take a lot of time to say, like, their reactions to being the objects of the male gaze and male behavior. There are people, you could probably teach a 17-week course on this movie alone, or at least as far as themes go. That's important, but I don't think that's where it derives its genius. It's probably more of a shock, and we got plenty of those way later. What's the first thing I thought of with this movie? Was white chicks with the Wayans brothers playing women. You have the idea that there are certain comedians that won't do drag. There are certain comedians that will. Think of Tyler Perry's whole shtick with Medea. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I think what's fun about those, at least in with modernity, is that you get to see what's gained, and I don't think its genius it derives from something being taken away. They do comment on it themselves in the movie, which is fun and prescient. Like it shows that they kind of knew a little bit about what they were doing. It was more special than a representation of this screwball era time.
And I would go a little further too, because I appreciate the connection to screwball comedy that Russell made. I see a lot of vaudeville here.
Mm-hmm. Another interesting component of when you're doing this, you're creating juxtapositions, and then there lies a lot of the humor. And like you said, what is gained and the enlightenment of just like, hey, I'm starting to see the perspective of, I'm one of those low down dirty saxophone players and I hurt people, you know, or hey, it's hard to be a woman and have Oswald like get all handsy with you in an elevator. I don't like that, actually, even though, you know, he was sitting there drooling. To contrast that, you have Marilyn Monroe, who is just straight up femininity.
Marilyn has that line where she's talking about Daphne's bathing suit, and she's like, "Oh, you're so flat chested," and rather than say like, "Oh, you're a man, like I know what you are," she's like, "Oh my God, clothes hang so much better on you than they do me," and she has these like beautiful boobs. Like, can we talk about Marilyn Monroe's boobs? Like, amazing, hyper femininity, like Dolly Parton, Nicki Minaj, these people we know now that are hyper feminine. And she's just like, "You're way better than I am. You can pass. This works."
Very funny. It's also great to see the play between the two characters. Josephine is unaware. This feels uncomfortable. He's been dragged into this. This wasn't technically his idea, and he has been forced into it. He is uncomfortable. You see it in his character, that he's going to be clocked or picked out as a man. And it reads through in his acting. Tony Curtis does a great job of feeling uncomfortable. In fact, it borderline might not be acting. It just might be being uncomfortable in the 50s doing this. And then
I was thinking about that.
And then conversely, Jerry, played by Jack Lemmon, Daphne, as he prefers to be called, and he even in that line, as you mentioned, Dustin, he's having, you know, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to kind of have fun with it. You know, he comes in off of a date and he actually likes being pursued. Like, it's not necessarily that he necessarily is attracted to Oswald. He likes being wined and dined and treated nicely, and the door opened for him, and he's got maracas, and he's like swinging them around, like saying like, "Ooh, I had a good night," you know, like this was fun. And there's this really funny moment of like, he's almost on vacation from masculinity, and that you know, he almost struggles in hiding his enthusiasm for still liking women while he's doing it. But aside from that, not coming off as lesbian is his biggest challenge, because otherwise the world of womanhood is kind of, dare I say, kind of fun for him. Jerry seems to like enjoy it enough to the point where that's part of the comedy in this, and that difference between the two characters is very funny.
I think there's something here where let's put it straight. Does he enjoy? Is his life better as a woman? I think so.
He bags a rich dude, so I mean,
the way that
he was into it,
the speed at which he adopts that this is just the way it is now, and I like it, is so comedic. She is a made woman now because she found Fielding. And I'm just like, I tried to move past what the intention was and just focused on the production, which was she's having a great time. Daphne's life is great. They dance until the sun comes up.
They take turns being uncomfortable and comfortable with it, and they go so deep undercover. And same thing. Joe gets so deep in with Sugar, he can't get out of this relationship because he just likes being around her, and so they egg each other on, and they push and pull against each other in ways, and that push and pull is where the comedy lies between Joe and Jerry.
Again, my perception of this now is that we are not laughing at this whole kind of comedy routine. Like, there is a certain freedom in it, and that is the magic of it. Masculinity, as much as a production as femininity is, right? And you don't need to be beholden to that. You can play with both sides. All the colors are at your disposal, right? It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can be both. That's
a salient point.
Or shades in between.
Tony Curtis was first signed by United Artists, and he was pressured. Billy Wilder wanted Jack Lemmon, but they didn't really want, the studios didn't want Jack Lemmon. He doesn't have the name clout that he goes on to have. And so it wasn't until that they got Marilyn Monroe on board that she had enough star power to make this go to where Wilder had the freedom to sign Lemmon. It's insane that Lemmon is like such an amazing actor, and he goes on to have the career that he does, but this is the early part of his career where he doesn't have that clout. So once again, this movie doesn't work as well without Marilyn Monroe, but it also isn't made in the same way. You don't get Jack Lemmon if you don't get Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, there's a lot to say here, Russell. There is a lot to say. I am a big Marilyn Monroe fan, 100%. And this film in particular is right before, like 3 years before her death. And this was quite a toll upon her as an actor. She had just had a miscarriage and was on this film now and getting pregnant as well and trying to maintain that pregnancy, which is an exceptionally emotional and very tolling time upon an individual. And she's met with the baggage of that while also delivering this film, which is also a film in which she is playing the dumb blonde character, which she is known for, and she does so well. She does better than anyone else. And that is, I think, is perceived by a mass culture to be not a true actor, but just a ditzy kind of character. That is the beauty and the tragedy of this film, right? This is one of Marilyn's last pictures. But yeah, so that there's all that here with Marilyn.
The nerves that she had, like she would just shake her hands and she couldn't get her lines right repeatedly. There's a mental breakdown. She wanted to be taken seriously as an actress, I'd read that she had been studying method acting. She wanted to be in roles of prestige, and this hurt that she took this. It's easy. It's just bluff, and in essence, it's doing what you don't want to do, which none of that shows. I mean, they were talking about hours to take a scene, in some cases, 40, 50, 70 takes to get one line right. And the actors around her, like Tony Curtis, was just getting angry, afraid that the one time that she gets it right, that maybe he'll get it wrong. This is great. This is a really great piece. I'm glad she did this, but it came at cost. Like you said, there's the tragedy of Marilyn, and I was really surprised to see that because it does not look like a train wreck. They blew their time out of the water. Like they extended, like they had to build their whole scenes around like, what if Marilyn doesn't come in? They were strained. The production was hard and extended because of Marilyn's quote unquote unreliability. But
most people don't make a mark on the world, and we rarely get into this depth of conversation about any of our actors. But Marilyn Monroe, this piece, this performance will be what I will remember her for, and what I think maybe the world should remember her for. Russell, you said it, it's the #1 comedy in the AFI. Mm-hmm. Her ability to get to the performance that we got was hard, and it hurt. But what we got was gold. more so than the iconic pictures. She's a more recognizable name than any U.S. president, and it's hard to attain permanence, and she has it in culture. I won't link her tragedy of what came later in her short life to the performance in this movie. I will consider ourselves lucky that we got what we got.
You don't have it without her. I mean, it is, Billy Wilder, Tony Curtis, Jack Lemmon, Marilyn Monroe. Any one of them aren't there, this doesn't work like it does.
I think you're right.
So, I mean, the fact that the studio...
It's going to be fun to recast this.
I know. Oh, I know.
Got a weird one.
Jack Lemmon, the fact that the studios just kept sitting there saying, I don't want this guy. He's nobody. I mean, how does it feel to be so wrong? Like, I feel like somebody loses their job on that. They should. I mean, he's so good at it. So,
he's so good.
Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon put on their first female makeup costumes, and they walked around the Goldwyn Studios to see if they could pass for women, because they had done hours and hours and hours of makeup testing. And so their big challenge was to go into a women's room. And even before they showed Billy Wilder, they just said, Tony Curtis was like, let's just go to the women's room, see if we pass. And they did their voices. And actually, Tony Curtis gets his voice dubbed in the movie because he's got a very deep voice, and I don't think his voice is not going to fly. So they dubbed his voice. But they go in, they do their thing, and the women were polite and didn't say get out kind of thing. Part of me still says there and goes, I think women are just nicer about this and might have just been polite at the time anyway. Like, oh, bless your heart, you're trying.
But maybe we can look at it this way, is that like with the voices they put on, because the voices they put on aren't realistic. And so I think what we have to do is we have to convince ourselves that like, oh, these voices they put on, I think are better for the comedic stylings of the audience watching than they are for the, oh, this person actually sounds like a woman.
Exactly. Yeah, and in fairness, they were being coached.
You can't Mrs. Doubtfire your way all the way on a train down to Florida.
Yeah. That awareness of not losing that awkwardness and being a part of the humor is, I mean, there's humor in it. So
we get plenty of it, but the giddiness of the two men. I mean, at this point, they're like kind of like two boys, like the cocks in the hen house. That like, oh, can you believe our situation? Oh boy, I tell you. And some of that is good. If that's what all of this was, I would have been bored by it. Instead, we get introduced to so many fun new situations and listening to the understanding. I do think a lot of credit has to go to the script, because the jokes are great. Situations are quite funny. I really didn't know where they were going once they introduced like the second trick, which is like, oh, he's going to dress up like a millionaire now. And it ends up going for so long. It was just well done. And I was kept guessing. I said, well, how are they going to do this? And then surprise, mob conference.
It was an opera conference, sir. Italian opera.
Yes. The appreciators of Italian opera. They couldn't find a guy that knew how to flip a coin. They had to teach somebody on set, hey, you look like you could be an Italian mobster. You want to flip this coin? Sure, I never done it before. They couldn't find someone that's flipped a coin before.
I was going to talk a little bit about Jack Lemmon signing on to this, because when he read it, it was only a partial script. And what he had said to his person or associate, whomever he was talking with at the time, about this was like, why did you sign up for that? And he's like, oh, it's a good script. It's Billy. He knows what he's doing. I'm committed now, and he's going to write the part for me. And so it's going to be superb. And it was. And
it was.
Like, I'm going to pick back up on the Marilyn thing too now. Like, she was so good in this. Amazingly good. And it's so sad that she gets so much baggage for being quote unquote problematic during this time period when she's dealing with all of this stuff. And she still delivers this amazing performance.
Russ, real quick, I want to ask, I really didn't want to forget it before we moved on. What was the 30 seconds that was changed? Do you have that info? There was one small change, because I really want to learn what that was.
It was a scene in the train, and it might have been 60 seconds, but it was the scene in the train where I think Marilyn gets into Josephine's bunk, and they have a little dialogue together.
Is it kind of when she's talking about how like her and her sister used to like snuggle together?
No. That was Daphne. That was
that's
kept.
Right.
And that's
that was kept. It was a separate one where she gets into Josephine's bunk, and I believe also there was something about Daphne coming down too, and it was about two men being in the bunk together at the same time, and kind of quote unquote, as Billy Wilder said, gilding the lily in terms of the homosexual nature of this film. And so they took it out.
And I don't think that was the thing that sank its screening before, to your point, Dustin. I just think where they showed it and who they showed it to, and I don't know, the world struggles with what they view as subversive behavior. It's like I said, it's cool that this works so well for comedy, for time and time again. It's funny that society can empathize, become part of these characters, see all this stuff, learn their lessons, and then still have an issue with it, because that's how it kind of goes for many, many years anyway.
It's an interesting kind of litmus test for the people, is to say, do you like this fun, entertaining thing? Well, yeah. Good.
And I said Brentwood. The preview was at Westwood, a section of audience of LA, and the crowd loved it, by the way. It was Westwood. And again, younger college campus thing. People stood up and cheered. So the degree of like, I'm walking out, nobody's happy, versus standing ovation, huge difference. And here's the thing, but they paired it with a different movie that was serious, and then they watched it. So it's like giving somebody a dish that just doesn't belong together, and then asking them how they felt about that. Whereas the second screener didn't have that problem. Billy Wilder had worked with Marilyn Monroe before on 7 Year Itch. Now, DJ, do you see comparisons to their work there together versus here? Marilyn and Billy, that is?
A little. I definitely see more comparisons in Billy Wilder's opening scene with Marilyn, where she's walking to the train, and you get the hiss of the steam engine, and she kind of turns around and kind of like does this like demure kind of like, oh my goodness kind of thing, which is obviously relating back to the essential scene of the 7 Year Itch, where her dress blows up, where she's talking about men and kind of their ways. So yeah, I see some parallels.
Yeah. And again, he had worked with her before, so I think he thought it was going to go a lot easier this time. And again, that's just an indication of where Marilyn was in her life, not who she was as a human being necessarily. So, I guess they were considered, later working with her, and he did not want to work with her again coming out of this one. So you have somebody like Shirley MacLaine and being in the apartment the next year. Man, that's a heck of a back-to-back run, though. You go Some Like It Hot and then the apartment. So, I mean, he's on fire right now himself. So, but his directorial choices reflected his belief in the primacy of writing. He said that he really didn't enjoy directing very much. He considered himself a writer, and that he was essentially, in the second half of his career, he'd become this director out of the need to not get in the way of the writing. Writing was what Billy did first and foremost. That's what he considered himself. And so as a film creator, he's doing it to keep the integrity of the story, the characters. And so it's very interesting. You talked about that Bones 40-page script, DJ. You have a writer at the helm guiding this through, shaping it constantly as it goes through. I think this is just one of the things that makes Billy Wilder so good. I mean, we talked about this in Take the Money and Run. Woody Allen kind of does the same thing. He's really a writer, and he just happens to direct movies. If you look at Billy Wilder's direction, it's not cinematography buffets. Like, he's not that fancy. This is not a pretty presented movie. I found it interesting and got nominated for cinematography, black and white, in the Oscars. It's just a good movie. But correct me if I'm wrong, DJ, maybe I missed it. I didn't think this was that well shot necessarily. I didn't think the movie was that ambitious. He's incredibly judicious. Like, he cuts people off. The actors kept feeling like, I needed another take, or why did you cut me off then? And he always just knows, as an editor, that's all I need. and he cuts people off. And there's this amazing efficiency that he has, which again contrasting with the problems that Marilyn was having. But he doesn't really consider himself a director first. He's a writer first in his mind.
Yeah, it is not a smorgasbord of like sexy shots or things like that. Like what he liked to do in this was his kind of master shot kind of oeuvre, where like you film a scene from beginning to end, almost like a continuous take, basically. So if one person messes up their line, the whole scene is spoiled, right? And that's why Marilyn's issues became a problem during this film, because if they couldn't all get through the scene, then it had to be redone multiple times, right? But at the same time, I feel that, I mean, I don't know Billy. I've never worked with him, obviously, but I feel like he was very cruel to Marilyn, because there were many times when they could have just shot the scene and then dubbed it over with dialogue.
At times they did.
But he kept going for, I want this to be perfect. I need this to be perfect. And it's this kind of like maniacal drive to perfection.
It's like he's obsessed with his secret ingredient. Like this must be in every 5 to 7 minutes. If I don't get my dose of it, then I'm failing. Speaking of the shots and some of the things I noticed, there's another dubbing situation where I think the Runnin' Wild song is poor. I like the song, but it's really poorly dubbed in the movie. Not just like poor for the movie, just like it kind of made me cringe. Some of the like sexy shots. Let's just talk about like the women running around in their women's bunk on the train. I thought there was. I'm gonna say. There's like a bit of restraint that could have gone hog wild. There could have been a lot more, and the fact that there was less made me feel like, good job realizing that you can't show this much. Whether it was Marilyn in frame or some of the other ladies. Sometimes you just had like a curtain of legs, like Tony Curtis is like sticking his head out, and you're like, oh my, this is really quite risque. So there were some things that I thought were, like, as far as film making, like, stood out. Some of them were flubs, but some of them were good. I thought the music was fun throughout the whole movie. There were some scenes too, like in the banquet hall where the mob birthday surprise is going to happen. That was really quite bland to me from the corner. They're kind of the choices to shoot to where you have Spats and his crew sort of in the center of the frame, which makes sense, but also you're just seeing a lot of backs of heads, stuff that I just thought to myself, like, oh, okay, I'm starting to notice something, and if I'm noticing something, then the more critical film heads will have noticed it. It seemed, some things seemed a bit off, but I guess the way that you described his sort of background as a writer instead, it makes sense why maybe not as much attention was paid to these things.
Yeah, he's trained as a journalist, by the way. He's a writer.
Right.
He became a writer in Germany and wrote silent movies, and then he has to flee Germany because it's not a good time for certain people who don't fit the Nazi agenda. And he goes to Paris initially and then comes to America, and he co-writes Ninochka. Ninochka, thank you. In 1939 and Hold Back the Dawn in 1941, both get nominations for Best Academy Awards, Best Screenplay. So dude comes over, blows the lid off of it as a writer. And that's what springboards his whole filmmaking career. He never stops writing. And so, to your point, he hasn't been trained as a cameraman or anything like that. He doesn't come from a theatrical world. He's from a journalist world.
Sure.
That's how he makes his movies. And it does show. He is not Spielberg with framing, camera movements. And granted, Spielberg comes decades later. However, if you look at like how William Wyler did Roman Holiday with Audrey Hepburn, which we covered about a year ago, beautiful movie. I don't think William can make a movie, he did Ben-Hur too, by the way. I don't think the dude can make something that doesn't look beautiful. It's just like he can't stop seeing how to just shoot it in a beautiful way. That's not how Billy works. And in fairness, Billy's later career leaves this very dramatic world and does go 7-Year Itch. And, it does leave. I mean, dude did double indemnity early on, Sunset Boulevard, Sabrina, like, And then later on, he goes and has a career change. It's lighter affair. Now, it has a lot of integrity. It's well written, and it's written with characters, but he shifts his career quite drastically. It's very possible we'll come back and cover one of his movies again later and be having a very different conversation about like how he functions in the role, because I find it interesting. He's like two really good directors' careers in one dude.
Interesting.
So
you read about how long it took them to edit this thing together, and it was like within a week or so, which is unheard of. Like, a lot of time goes into editing together a film. And he was so good and so on point to know when to tell someone to cut a scene, that he didn't end up with all these extraneous pieces of material that you had to piece together to make the scene. That was the scene. It was done. This is it on film. We are going to use this now. And that's very rare for that time.
It's almost like instinct in a way. Like, oh, this kind of works.
it is.
Yeah.
He's pretty far in his career as a director at this point, too, though. I mean, like, this is the second half of his career. So, like, to DJ's point, dude knows what he needs.
And nothing more.
He doesn't want any more than, I don't need anything more. Like, so... I was actually refreshed to find out this was shot on location. A lot of this they went, not to Florida. They said it in Florida. Florida's like kind of like Hawaii at this point in history. Like this is exotic. This is the getaway. Florida. Wow, you went to Florida? Cool. Yeah. So just you can interchange this. If this were set now, this would have been set in Hawaii. But anyway, the resort, though, that they filmed was actually the Hotel de Coronado in San Diego, which is obviously closer to movie-making world in L.A. But they went there. Good on them. They shot those. And, Marilyn's ongoing problems became more difficult as things had set in. But I thought that was cool. They found an old Victorian resort hotel. It's been in other movies before, but this is obviously the top of the list. It's in Wicked from 1973 with Peter O'Toole, The Girl in the Golden Watch and everything. My Blue Heaven. I really like this movie. It's a Steve Martin, Rick Moranis movie. Talking about faking who you're not. That's another good one. So this resort pops up there, here and there again, and good on them for going there. At this point, you're not granted that necessarily. A little bit earlier in filmmaking history, they don't do that. So I think Billy Wilder has the clout to go shoot there. So I like that. I don't feel like we were in Chicago as much per se. I felt like I was swimming in resort escapism. They depicted a certain vibe, but I didn't feel like I got the, like when we did The Sting, that was Gangster World, Chicago. This is not The Sting. Is that fair? I felt like I was watching a 1940s movie where everything was very controlled and a very set kind of thing. And they that changes when they go to Florida.
I suppose maybe it's fair to say that we knew that we were getting out of Chicago as soon as we could.
Wardrobe. I was surprised. In a movie where men have to be portrayed as women, they did do some amazing work on this one. But one of the reasons to shoot this movie in black and white was their makeup apparently looked green on camera, and they looked sick and super not believable. And I've seen a couple photographs of them, and I'll be honest with you, the photographs do look a little bit pale. I'm in disbelief that they couldn't work it out personally in the makeup department. So, I don't know. Maybe cosmetics have come a long way since then.
So here's the thing. Here's the thing you need to know about black and white film, is that when you're filming in black and white, you change the color rendering of makeup. And so if they seem green or if things seemed not right in color in black and white, it was believable, right? So I believe both of them or one of them had red wigs, which you do not perceive at all in black and white, but it looks believable. And when you see the color pictures of them, it's like, oh my God, that's a man in drag. Like, it's the whole
extreme,
suspension of disbelief collapses immediately. But once you put that in black and white, it is more realistic and more appealing to the observer.
Billy City liked it being in the 20s, like put you in the time period. I don't know. You didn't walk around the 1920s actually in black and white. We just movies to Billy from that time period were in black and white. I don't know that I buy that as much. Part of me wishes that we could have made this work in color because, or even done a Wizard of Oz thing where Chicago was shot in like black and white and like, Florida was in color almost. But I mean, to some degree of not necessarily that, but you think of femininity of, okay, being colorful and full of color. So like if you see like dudes like on like a cologne ad, they're always like in black and white. And like, like strong, classy, timeless, black, white. And it's the opposite. Like fashion magazines, billboards and things, femininity is always in super colors. So I just thought as a direction decision that they took away bullets out of their chamber that they could have had to play with this world. But I can't complain too much. I mean, I just thought it was part of me did wish this could have been in color.
But so I see that as them going back to that kind of mafia movie kind of point of view, like the 1920s mafia escapade, whatever it is. Like that was why they did black and white, and I appreciate that. Like I think it's pretty magical. Like I've always had an appreciation for films that could have done color but didn't for whatever reason. And they chose black and white as the medium through which they wanted to express themselves. Like that is a choice. There is something magical about that still.
I look at like Asphalt Jungle, 50s movie that we did, Killers in the 40s that we did, and Maltese Falcon. I feel like sometimes when you have black and white, it's just so dramatic and so well done. And again, I don't mean to keep knocking Billy Wilder's skill. I don't feel like he hits the low key lighting, the shadow, the solid, the void. Like I don't feel like he plays the game of black and white filming in a pretty way. So I find myself all the things that I like of a noir 40s movie. I don't think I don't think any of that's there actually. So I don't know. I'm gonna stop being so mean to Billy Wilder now. So, but also, this stuff is not rigorously made for the 20s. There's 50s-isms as you start to read on this, just popping up all over the place. Even Marilyn's performance dress, like when she's singing, big moments there. They're like pseudo kitschy 20s. Like they didn't put a lot of work into getting this right. I don't know if that's the result of it's too recent. Like if you were tasked right now with going back and making a movie that was 35 years ago, I still think you could do better of just only staying in that lane and not letting I think that they said that what the men are wearing are actually more accurate and that the women around them are dripping with 50s things and that they have moments of like they're wearing 50s purses and stuff like that. And like there's just things around in the environment that show more clearly. Now we have the benefit of it's all old to us. It's all real old to us and it starts to just blend in. These things become more forgiving.
It kind of bleeds a little bit. Yeah.
It does. Yeah. And this will become more forgiving over time. However, watching historians pick it apart and people who actually know what they're doing here, it is surprising this movie that comes with Oscar nominations and makeup awards and things like that the wardrobe wasn't more rigorous. Just a surprise of mine.
Anachronisms are always a part of film. Like we can pull apart other film pieces, which we won't get into here, for not kind of upholding their time period. But I mean, I agree with you, Russell. Like it's so far removed from us at this point in time that it is difficult to decipher what is and is not canon for the time period. I'm in particular thinking of Marilyn Monroe's dress in the final kind of show scene or the performance scene, which is not 1950s. Like but it's sexy. It's very sexy.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's not 1920s. It is 1950s. But it's sexy though.
I'm willing to let a whole bunch of stuff slide if the difference. If you had to describe low-waisted denim of the 2001, 2003 to someone that had never seen it before, You'd have to say, no, seriously, go lower. Seriously, go lower. We wore it like that. Like, what? There's some things that the bleed is almost better than the perfect accuracy.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, seriously, go lower. I need to see. You don't understand.
No, pubic hair. We need to see pubic hair.
We need to see pubic hair here.
That's a very good point, Dustin. So it's just one of those things where when I stumbled across an article that actually had like fashion expert people who do this for a living in wardrobe and movies going back and reanalyzing this, and again they put their work into the main two, and that they do come off as what stuffy women in the 20s would have worn more on the more like we went to a conservatory, like I mean, so their hats and what they did is actually more. The wigs are probably the part that were grilled the hardest. I think you mentioned them earlier, DJ. Like you were a little hard on those. I think they were saying that those were rough even for then, and they probably should have done a better job with their wigs even at the time. So anyway, it just was one of those things where it surprised me of like, in a movie where you are trying to be somebody you're not. I'm surprised they didn't do better there. So,
well, I mean, then we think of the time period too. Is like if this would be impossible with certain types of clothing. I thought that they would have given up the goat right away when it came to swimming, right? Or the idea that any type of like swimming garment of the late 20s, that you wouldn't be seeing just the sheer tons of hair that Jack Lemmon must have. But then you put into perspective, like, okay, well, swimming caps. Are we doing this at a time when caps would have been? Think about the lengths of the dresses that they wear. I mean, these things are done, I think, and same with the makeup. Like, I'm going to jump in here to say, I think these are done just to give us our best shot of making it seem like these men could pass off as women, which we know would be impossible in real life. So what's the best shot we could do? Well, if we pick a time period where the dress length would have been down at the calves, then maybe we have a shot. And if we're doing something where there's no low décolletage, then maybe we have a shot. And if we're doing something where hats are worn, then maybe we have a shot. Otherwise, just the fact, just being in bed next to Daphne, you would have realized those are a man's legs. Like there's, I think the goal was to, how do we just iron this out to make it seem like it's possible, because we know that it's not.
They did add in a strong musical element, as you mentioned earlier, that you had fun with it. That's a soundtrack created by Adolf Deutsch, and the soundtrack does have an authentic 1920s jazz feeling. So the brassy strings and instruments and stuff like that they're playing of, where the line in the movie comes, "Some like it hot." They have to dial it back down with what they're doing because they've been playing in these, clubs and stuff like that, and they have to be restrained, like conservatory. So even the guise of what they're doing as far as music goes was carried into the music.
Yeah, big brassy. I actually have a little bit more to say about that in an upcoming section.
How about we do superlatives?
I'm ready.
All right. MVP, DJ.
Well, I think you all know who I'm going to choose. It's going to be Marilyn Monroe.
Yep, she's an icon. Dustin, how about you?
I'm glad one of you actually mentioned this earlier. It's Tony Curtis in finding it hard to play this role. That's I think he was. If you had to pick someone, like, can you be uncomfortable playing a woman? He was born for that. And so I think it worked. There is the moment, I think, when you first see him, like the way that he's holding his head, obviously his coach showed him how to walk. I think the execution of just almost being able to do it makes it funnier than I think Jack Lemmon does a more natural job of it. So I think that's fun. Now, it's only half the movie where he's pretending to be a woman, but I think maybe it's because I was unfamiliar with Tony Curtis before this. This was my introduction to him. So I'm giving him the MVP, actually.
I got to give him a credit, too. He does a pivot that nobody else has to, where he does a double fake identity. And his rich guy persona, which we haven't talked about, it's hilarious. It's like an impression of Cary Grant. And it's a bad impression, but like an exaggerated impression. So much so that even Cary Grant got done and watched this movie and said, "I don't sound like that."
It's good.
So, very funny that his rich guy persona was just very funny as well. So I like your pick there. And I'm going to complete the trio here. Jack Lemmon is mine. I think him having this field day and this, at times tortured balance between, I don't like what I'm doing. I'll never get away with this. I'm nervous, but then also coming in and playing maracas, having a wonderful time is like,
It's so silly.
He elevates this to the comedy. Just makes, like you said, none of this works. But Jack Lemmon being so silly is what makes it work that it doesn't work. So it's funny. So, yeah, I think a lot of the play between what is femininity versus masculinity comes through in Jack Lemmon's humor, and I mean that's one of this movie is so great. So, I love Jack Lemmon always. So you can't go wrong putting him in any movie. He's one of the best people at range. Like he has like this Robin Williams like range to be able to do intense, serious, warm, grumpy, funny. I mean, like, there's nothing he can't do. So, best supporting actor, DJ.
I'm going to go with Joe E. Brown as Osgood Fielding III.
He's great. What a character.
That's magic. Yeah.
Zowie. It was just Zowie.
How many times have you been married?
Yeah, I don't
8,
remember.
9? I don't remember.
I'll tell you, that's my choice too. Just dynamite on screen.
He's so great, and I don't know that she's technically counts as supporting, but I did go Marilyn Monroe. Hidden gem, DJ.
I'm going to say all of the girls on the train in the birth scene when they're all having like the party and like it's just like this field day of just like insanity. And how in the world did they fit all that many people into a berth in a 1920s train car? Like, how did that work out?
That's back when we can afford to ride the train.
I thought it was so funny to watch what it would have been like in the 20s, just to be like, I've got like a plastic Dixie cup with some alcohol, like, and how excited everybody was.
The
like,
party,
I mean,
ladies.
like, that's really off limits. It's literally illegal. So, I mean, it's a whole nother. That is funny, DJ.
Do you have
very
bourbon?
funny.
Yeah, it's
Do you
like,
have
Judy,
vermouth?
don't you have
Yeah,
vermouth?
You
Dustin.
have maraschino
Yeah.
cherries? I've got the salami.
That was great. Yeah, good pick.
Well, and
there.
then there's something else too that's kind of period specific. Like somebody gets some ice, and they have to get a big block of ice and
chip
chip
it
away
down,
at it.
yeah.
Like it's awesome.
Dustin, hidden gem.
Mine will reference back to the music, and you first hear it when they're doing their rendition of "Sing, Sing, Sing," which a lot of you people will know as the Chips Ahoy commercial song, that big brassy swing song. This movie and the soundtrack for it utilizes a mute. Our friend Nathan will know about mutes for brass instruments.
Like a plunger?
That it looks like a plunger, and Louis Armstrong did some great work with it. But essentially, the mute work in this soundtrack is maybe the best I've ever heard in a movie.
Isn't it sad
And so
that
I was blown away.
Isn't it sad that an impressive piece of music over time becomes reduced to it's the Chips Ahoy song?
The Chips Ahoy
Yeah.
song. Everyone knows what I'm talking about.
I do know what you're talking about, and I needed that, but it's sad that I needed that. So
It's not that sad. Chips Ahoy's good.
thank you, Dustin. My hidden gem is going to be Harry Wilson. He is Spats' henchman, and he's the one with the big
yeah.
knobby nose who gets a couple of speaking lines. What a good, rough henchman he is. And he runs the perfect line between like, yeah, I'm tough, and this could work in like a gangster movie, but I'm also in a comedy movie. So, and like there's like a fun thuggery about him. So Harry Wilson was just so perfect for walking the line of what this movie is. So recast, DJ, it's going to be hard. You said it was going to be hard. You're going to do what I do and just go deeper in the cast?
No, it's going to be hard, but I'm gonna go top bill. I'm going to recast Tony Curtis, mainly because I have an axe to grind against him and him describing his kiss with Marilyn Monroe as like kissing Hitler, quote unquote. So I'm going to get rid of him and go for James Dean instead.
Okay, wow.
Oh, he could pull it off.
I think there was a real frustration in the and what from the outpoint, you might not have even known what she was going through. I have to remember that too. Of just like, how frustrated would you be working with somebody who does keep not showing up, not doing what they're supposed to do, and you are counting on them. So, I mean, these stories sound horrible, and Marilyn's such a likable person that you're like, that's a jerk thing to say. So, and no, she is not like kissing Hitler. She's beautiful. He is the opposite of beautiful. And she has no little weird mustache. That's not at all accurate. That's a bad comparison.
Nobody said he was good at comparisons.
But anyway, Dustin, recast.
All right, I got a weird one here, and I want to recast it, or I just want to include it in the movie. So I'm going to pick a classic British cinema, man's man, lived a very particular type of life. Oliver Reed. I want him in this movie, maybe as Beanstalk instead of Dave Barry.
Yeah,
I think it'd be a crazy dynamic. He could not, and certainly would not, do drag. There's no way. But what if he was at the point of his career where he would? And what if there was a third guy in the all-women's band who's undercover for a different reason? I don't know. I'm just playing around with this, and maybe he gets found out while the other two stay hidden. I'm just playing around, but I just thought to myself while I'm watching this movie, Oliver Reed would be weird here. Well, I guess that's my answer for the show. So I'm just going to put it in there.
I'm going to go with a similar direction, but different. I'm coming after Dave Barry as well, who plays Beanstalk. He's the male orchestra manager. So the guy with the really big glasses. While physically funny, I don't find his performance to like deliver as much as some of these other side characters do, because this movie has good side characters for the most part. And I thought to myself, wouldn't Milton Berle be funny dad in here? Milton Berle does drag himself in his career, and so you're not actually putting him in drag in the movie. Like, he's not actually cross-dressing in the movie, but he has done so, and he is known to have done so. So you're playing with the audience's expectations and tipping the hat, and we're all under the umbrella, under the pink umbrella,
sure,
if you will. So, I mean, I think that would be a fun tip of the hat to what we're doing here. So,
yeah.
Also, he's funny. So getting some more funny people never goes wrong. So, best shot, DJ. We just laid into Billy for not having beautiful shots. Did you find one that you thought was the best shot?
I mean, yes and no. There are some good ones. The one I put down for this was nobody's perfect scene, which is the final scene. And I will leave it at that for now because I'm going to revisit that in my best quote series.
DJ, sorry, your names both start with D and it's late. Sorry, Dustin.
D's.
Dustin.
Mine is when Jerry is hanging upside down while Joe is sleeping. And it's a funny shot because Joe is sleeping in a really glamorous way. Like almost like a on a fainting couch almost, like or somebody was like having to pose for a painting of what it looks like to sleep in the most glamorous way. And it was another moment where I laughed out loud. And then you get sort of the silliness. I think Jack Lemmon nails it with his just comedic, just his face sometimes, his reactions to things. The way the hair bobs on his head is funnier for some reason. Maybe it's just because it's Jack Lemmon. But that shot was, I wrote it down while the movie was going. I said, come back to this because I think it's the shot of the movie.
I don't think this is a movie of clever shooting. As I mentioned before, there's moments that make you happy because of who is in the shot.
There you go. Yeah.
But I think one of the more resourceful moments was a moment of taking a feminine accessory of the makeup mirror and shooting the shot when Daphne is looking in the mirror and sees the gangsters coming in the door at the hotel, and like holy crap, who just walked in the door kind of moment. And so that was creative. It was done off of a reflection. So it was a dramatic moment for the movie where there was another turn in the comedy, but it was also seen through this reflection of the makeup mirror itself. So do more of that, Billy Wilder. Good work on that one. Best scene. This is tougher. DJ.
Best scene is going to be one of the openers for me, and that's when Marilyn's entering the train station and the train hisses at her, and we get that allusion back to the 7-year itch. Good callback.
Sugar walking on screen. Excellent. Dustin. Best scene.
The comedy of the boat parlor when he's feigning being a millionaire and explaining why he can't fall in love. The writing is so funny. The acting is spot on. There's some other just silliness to it. And then there's always the moment to like, oh, you're somewhere where you're not supposed to be and this could fall apart at any minute. It was very, very fun. So that's my best scene.
Oh, what kind of fish is that? A herring? How they get them in the little jars so small?
Yeah, little things. Oh, so good.
My best scene is when Osgood gives Jerry or Daphne a diamond bracelet and he brings it back to the room and he gives it, and Joe ends up later then in turn giving it to Sugar. This whole run of like, what have you done, Joe? You've gotten in, or Jerry, what have you done, Jerry? You've gotten in way too deep here and you're causing a huge mess. And then also Joe being like, well, that's not real. I can just give this to her. And she, like, I mean, the whole interplay as...
You calling my fiance a bum?
Yeah, I mean, there was just... I'm laughing a whole lot during this scene, and it really cracks me up. And it takes a lot to beat the final scene once they are found out and the mafia is chasing them. They're climbing out the windows, and there's like, when everything's crisscrossing and the jig is kind of up, that's a lot of fun. But I have to admit, the diamond bracelet, like the Osgood engagement kind of thing, is just it's too good. It's really good. Best wardrobe or makeup moment. Boy, if there was ever a time when this superlative was perfect, it's this time. DJ.
Well, I've already said it earlier, but again, I'm gonna go with that little black dress Marilyn's wearing and that final performance scene. That is superb and perfect, and she is beautiful.
And Dustin.
Mine's quick because I figured we'd talk more about the wardrobe earlier, which we did, which is Tony Curtis's glasses get steamed up in that parlor scene. And I'm like, what a gag. No one's above a gag. And it was comedy. So I loved it.
My best wardrobe moment is going to be when we first see Daphne and Josephine walking into the train station. We don't see them head on. We see them as leggings from behind on dude legs. And and you walk up from the leggings, and the camera does pan up, and you see this is who they are, and it was an abrupt cut from where they were in the previous scene. So it's a good cut, it's a good introduction, and it shows off the wardrobe from a non-assuming, like what it would be like to walk from behind these people. So. And if you don't really pay that much attention to anybody, but the camera's forcing you to pay attention to it. So that's part of it that, maybe that they could walk through a train station because nobody actually pays attention to other people that much. Change one thing, DJ.
This one's difficult, but if I were to change one thing, I do agree with Dustin. I feel like that the mafia scene towards the end is kind of clunky and kind of drawn out. I would shorten that a little bit more, and that's about it.
Dustin, how about you?
Let me expand on that. It's the exact same thing. I wrote this when I watched the movie, and I hadn't touched it since we started the show. So I'm just going to read what I wrote 2 weeks ago. They wanted to shoehorn in a bunch of mob gags and hijinks, and then have little Bonaparte deliver a weird speech connected to nothing. And this was just after the wild coincidence of them being at the same place in the first place. We need to end with some type of big performance. Remember, this is about the women's band, where the two end up getting outed somehow in some comedic way. Or there needs to be a need for two men to arrive out of nowhere, and they happen to be there. This movie is too lighthearted to have it become about organized crime in the end. That part was worse than clunky, DJ. It was bad.
Wow, I'm not bothered by that one as much as you guys are, given where we started the movie. But I considered it weaving in where this had come from. But
It's forced.
okay, no, that's valid.
I agree.
So I love the bellboy who finds Daphne hot and is like so shamelessly hitting on her and harassing her.
Little horn dog.
I feel like the hotel, so the train, as DJ mentioned, is a very multi-character moment. We don't get to see a lot of the hallway of the girls talking to each other and other characters that are going on in the hotel. You went there, you shot there in person, so I mean, you have the actual corridors, the lobbies, the elevators. I want to see a little bit more of this hotel world because the bellboy and some of the people are so funny. I think the side characters that this ad are good. Maybe Billy can weave in a few more humorous moments and add another layer of complexity, another moving part to this. I mean, it's already great. So it's like, I'm just saying, do what it's already doing, but maybe just add a little more into it.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
Best quote, DJ.
Okay, so I alluded to this earlier. This is going to be the final quote that's, well, nobody's perfect. And to set this up, Joe/Josephine has recently been outed to Sugar Cane as a man, and they are escaping on Osgood's boat with Daphne. We split away to Osgood and Daphne talking. We don't see the other two in this scene. And Osgood is explaining to Daphne that he wants to marry her and that this is going to happen. Immediately, Daphne's going through all these things. Well, I'm not really a blonde. I smoke. I was just in a 3-year relationship with a saxophonist, all this stuff. To which he's like, he's completely supportive and is a good person. Is like, I don't care. I love you. Like, you're perfect the way you are. And then she reveals the piece de resistance of this whole interlude. I'm a man. And his response to that is, well, nobody's perfect. And what I love about that is, obviously, that is an anticlimax. That is not how you expect this to end in any way whatsoever. It is also very transgressional for that time period because this is 1959. We still have the Hays Code in place, which is the kind of the moralistic undergirding of film in terms of permitting what is and is not acceptable. And I felt that this is kind of the pinnacle moment when the Hays Code ultimately is repealed, not officially, but it eventually, a couple years later, becomes repealed. But it is the ultimate kind of point in which we find this kind of questioning of this thing that has guided society for so long. And that is the beauty of that scene and that quote for me.
It is on the AFI greatest quotes list.
Well, the context makes it better.
It does.
The context makes it better for sure.
It does. Dustin.
Stop it.
Dustin, best quote.
Not anymore. I was in love once, but I would rather not talk about it. Would you like a little cold pheasant? That's, of course, from the parlor scene, and it's the speed at which he's scrambling to figure out where anything is in this parlor and just distract from whatever just to get to, in the end, this is a ruse to trick a woman into falling in love with you or marrying. Like, it's all a big trick. And so the speed of this improv is so good. The shock of the moving from this fake love story to, well, you want to try some of this cold bird here? It's very funny to me.
And mine is that interplay that DJ had said where, I smoke all the time. I don't care. Well, I have a terrible past. For 3 years now, I've been living with a saxophone player. I forgive you. And just like the constant fast stream of like the interplay of like, I can't have children. We can adopt some. And like the quickness of Osgood's problem solving, that none of this is a problem. And it all builds up to like, I'm a dude. And he's like, well, nobody's perfect. And like,
he's like so permissive and so sweet, and like he wants to solve the problems here. Like, he's a good person. Like,
it's good. It's a really good line. If I had to pick something different, I did love Jack Lemmon coming in and going like, "I'm engaged," and he said, "Congratulations! Who's the lucky girl?" I am. What? Osgood proposed to me. We're planning a June wedding. Like, like he's already thought about when the wedding's gonna be. And
Daphne's life is better than Jerry's life. It's awesome.
He's like, "What are you talking about? You can't marry him." He's like, "Do you think he's too old for me?" Like unable to break from character.
It's the best.
Love that interchange. So funny. All right, we have to do this. This is a big moment here. On a 5-star scale, half-star intervals. DJ, what do you rate? Some like it hot.
4.5. Those mobster scenes get a little grueling.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought you held back from the full 5. I had you pegged for full 5 on this one. So, Dustin, how about you?
I'm actually going to go with a 4 here, and I'm really using the reliance on the Italian Opera Appreciators Conference. I think that was just slammed together. I don't like it, but I love everything else. So because of that, a 4, I should give it a 3.5, but a 4, it's just so good at so many other things, and it's really rare for me to line up with like a popular list. For me to think that the number 1 comedy on the AFI list is as funny as it was really surprised me. So 4 stars, and I'm glad. I feel like I've like grown a little bit to be able to appreciate the movie. So it's a 4-star.
I'm going full 5. And this one, I think it's just such an intelligent movie that, it deals with masculinity versus femininity. It has held up so well over time. It towed the line of what was edgy at the time. It's a very difficult thing to do 70 years later and to still hold meaning. It does all of those things. It inspired a really good conversation here about a number of topics. And again, so far removed from when it was made. And I think blatantly, honestly, it is just enjoyably funny. And if it has an incredibly high rewatch value. And
yes.
And I have enjoyed watching it and coming back to it over and over again. I won't stop watching it. I don't pick it up as frequently as I should. Probably the runtime maybe gets into it, maybe the black and white nature of it, and finding the right people to say like, "Hey, let's all sit down and watch a funny movie." You're not being like, you can't take off the like, let's teach a film class kind of hat, a little bit with it. But I mean, it is that good. It is just really enjoyable. So it's a 5 for me. And I really enjoyed looking at it, talking about it with you guys, and it was just so much fun. So 5.
Great scores.
Yeah. Or sorry, the Italian opera goes Dustin. Nobody's perfect.
Oh, great. Thank you for that.
So, Dustin, you want to help me pick a movie for next time?
You got it.
Disney and Pixar do some amazing work and dominate much of the animated film world conversation, but Universal's DreamWorks has made some good ones as well, and today we have 3 DreamWorks animated movies. Option 1, How to Train Your Dragon from 2010. A hapless young Viking who aspires to hunt dragons becomes the unlikely friend of a young dragon himself and learns there may be more to the creatures than he assumed. Option 2, Shrek from 2001. A mean lord exiles fairy tale creatures to the swamp of a grumpy ogre who must go on a quest and rescue a princess for the lord in order to get his land back. And option 3, Ants with a Z. And a rather neurotic ant tries to break from his totalitarian society while trying to win the affection of the princess he loves. Dustin.
2001's Shrek, Russell.
All right. Shrek it is. All right. And DJ, thank you so much for joining us once again. These are always fun. Thank you, all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. We invite you to reach out to us, so we want to hear from you. So subscribe, rate, and review to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast. Give us a like on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at @movie_retro. And email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. We are on YouTube, so even if you follow us in other ways, go ahead and give us a subscribe there. That helps boost our numbers. We just love it. So, and producing and providing this podcast is fun but not free, so we invite you to support the show at our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/Retro Movie Roundtable. Any contributions are much appreciated. and will go towards making the show better for you, the listeners. As always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Dustin?
Go to that landless latitude and good luck. If you figure a way to live without serving a master, any master, then let the rest of us know, will you? For you'd be the first in the history of the world.